recording. Okay, so just to make sure whoever's watching the video, there's two major libraries. One of them is AWT and the other one is Swing. We're going to be using this one. Again, it doesn't really matter. It depends on your company. Now inside Swing, everything starts with the letter J. Okay? So as an example, you have J frame, J button, J label, J whatever. Okay? AWT on the other hand would be frame, button, so forth, so on. So you got to be careful of not mixing these together. Okay? So let's go ahead and create something. So the first thing we want to do is to create a window for us to interact. We're going to create a J-frame. Notice as soon as I type it, the IntelliSense pops up, gives me all the details. And what it's going to do is it's going to import the library I need. Right? So in this case, I need Swing. And I want to get all the classes in there. All the classes inside this package. Right? And if I do control, click on Swing, well, it's not going to go there, but you'll see as soon as I get J-frame, I can click on it, go see that code and so forth, so on. So the offer is Jeff Dinkins, George Saab, and David Kloba, whoever they are. Now, so J-frame is going to be our window. This is the first initial thing we're going to do. And we're going to create that object, J-frame. And inside here, if I do Control P, you'll notice there is a few constructors. One without a parameter, one with whatever graphics configuration is, one with a title, and another one with a title and the graphics, right? So the title is pretty cool. Let's try that out. This is the title bar. Cool. And if I run this, let's see what happens. Notice that it's ran, but I get nothing. Okay? So the first thing that we need to do is to make sure that that window that we created, we set the visibility to on. Otherwise, it's not there. Okay? And if we run it again, notice I got a window here. I can't really move it because it's too small. This is the window that got created. This is the original size. Gets created at the top left, which is a painful thing. Notice the title bar is being shown as the title here. Right? Pretty straightforward. If I close it, you'll notice my application did not close even though I closed it. Okay? So even though the window has been closed, my application could be running in the background or do whatever. Currently it is. So we got to tell it what it should do when the application X or when the window gets closed. What should it do? So we're going to do with set default close operation. And inside here, we're going to do exit on close, and it's going to bring you the stuff needed. And in this case, I don't want window constants. It's number 3. Usually it's J-frame.exit on close, which is 3. It's the same thing. It doesn't really matter. Okay? So now if I run it, you'll notice my application started. And if I close it with the X button, you'll notice my application has ended with the exit code 0. Now we want to do a bit more. Again, with the window, I'm going to set, let's say, a size. Notice that there's a size here that's overlined over it, saying basically this has been deprecated. But look here, we have two set sizes as I typed it. There's a set size that takes a width and a height, or one that takes a dimension object. We don't know what dimension object is, so let's go with the width height. Let's say 300, 300. Try it again. And look at here, this time I don't need to resize it because it's giving me the specified size. Cool? Now, does it matter if the order was different? Well, let's go see if I put the set visible, the first, and the rest afterwards. Does it change much? No. It's perfectly fine. Cool? Any questions so far? Now, this is a lot of work, and if I wanted to do another window, I would go ahead and copy that and call this Windows 1, Windows 1, Windows 1, Windows 1, and let's say this one is 400 and this one is 600. Let's see what happens. And let's say title here, I would say other window. Now you notice I got two windows. Cool? Now, the problem with this is these information that I'm reading here, set default, close operation, set size, set visible. These are meaningless, repetitive information. And I don't want to keep mentioning all of that just to create a window. Why do I need to do that, right? It's not the best. Everyone with me? So what do we want to do? It's to use our inheritance to affect the objects that have been already declared. So this JFrame that's already been declared by someone, right? This JFrame that's been, actually let's go back here. This JFrame that extends frame and implements all of this, we want to create our own version of it. We want to modify it to make it do our needs. So what are we gonna do? So like this, I don't need to create all of this shenanigans. So what we're gonna do is when I on the source, let me just delete the student thing. We don't need that, at least not yet. Right click on it, we're gonna create a new Java class, and we're gonna create our own type of GUIs, and we could create as many different variations as we want, but for now we're gonna call it GUI, right? It stands for graphical user interface. It's a common term used everywhere. And we want this GUI to be actually our JFrame. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make it inherit from JFrame. So now that makes it become also a JFrame. So if I wanted to, I could replace this part with GUI. Right? The only problem is it doesn't have a constructor that takes a title. So let's go ahead and create that. So public GUI, which let's say takes a title. And inside that, again, don't forget, this has a parent and the parent has a constructor. So we're gonna call super and pass in the title. And remember, it overloaded, right? So in this case, we had multiple constructors, one without any title. So whatever. So here now I could replace that with this, and it still works, right? Just replacing the words here, the object type, it works. Any questions right now? Look, this is how it looked before, and this is what it became. This is again because GUI extends JFrame, or in other words, GUI is a JFrame, right? Right? The is a, it's saying this is inheriting all the functionalities, all the attributes of JFrame. So it does basically the same things. It has also the same functionalities, the same attributes. Whatever is accessible, you can have access here as well. No questions? Okay. So because this gives us access to the JFrame the same way, you know, this repetitive, meaningless information, we could go ahead and put it inside our constructor. Now you notice I got an error. Oops, that's not what I want. You notice I got an error. If I put my mouse over it, it says cannot resolve the symbol window. Well, inside my main, I created a variable called window. But now I'm inside the constructor of a GUI. There is no such thing as a window. What should I do to fix this?
Super.
Well, one thing is to call the super. That's a good example. Because these functions exist inside JFrame, which is our parent, our inheritor, our super. So that's one way. You could put super everywhere that says window. But you also got to remember that these functions you inherited from JFrame. So in this case, these functions are part of you, right? So rather than putting super, you could just put nothing. And we are talking about our functions. As an object GUI, I have the set size, I have the set visible, I have the etc. Right? So now if we go back here, you'll notice our code looks a bit cleaner inside main, whereas our logic of our application. In this case, we're just saying the window, create me a new window, and I'm gonna keep this here. You're gonna see the both of them, right? Now I'm just saying create me a window with the title bar. I press run. Give it a second. And you'll notice I have my other window, which is this one, and I still have my window, which was the original thing we made, right? And again, we want to get to the clean code, right? Our main goal, clean code, readable code. So doing a little bit of left and right turns allows us to make something much cleaner, much more readable, much better for us. Cool? Any questions so far? And something to note in this. Yes. Sorry, one more time.
I missed it. What you have said right now. My Zoom has crashed. Can you repeat it again?
Yes, of course. So what happened is we created a GUI class, right? And we made the GUI class extend JFrame. So that's basically saying we're inheriting everything that's a JFrame. We're making our GUI a JFrame app, right? And if you remember our inheritance course or class or time, whatever, inheritance is used whenever you could say the word is a. Well, using that word, we can understand that a GUI is a JFrame. Now, normally JFrames, we create them by saying the type and creating an object of JFrame, which takes a title. Now, because GUI is inheriting JFrame, well, we could just go ahead and create a new GUI. And then we create a constructor that also could get a title if we want to, right? If you remember, JFrame actually has multiple constructors. One that takes no parameters, one that takes whatever graphics configuration is, one that takes title, and one that takes two things, title and graphics configuration. And we notice inside JFrame, to make the window actually pop out and have a specific size and a specific functionality, we needed to mention them one by one. Well, to be honest, we don't need to do that. It shouldn't be part of the stuff we need to do, because we always know it's going to be set visible to true. We always need a minimum size and etc. So what I suggested is we create our own custom GUI, which extends JFrame. And inside the constructor, we call the supers constructor. And now that we are a JFrame, we could just directly call our functions, our GUI functions, this dot functions, right? Because these functions become my function the moment I extended JFrame. I could have said this dot set close operation. I could have said super dot set size because they're also in JFrame. And I could have also said just set size, because by context, we understand we're talking about functions that belongs to this class GUI, right? And by the way, if your Zoom is crashing, maybe download it. Find Zoom nice for recording and whatnot. Anyway.
Thank you, sir.
No problem. I hope it made sense. If some place in this doesn't make sense, let me know now. And we'll try to explain as many times as best as possible.
So why did we use super here?
Well, because the string title is actually set inside the constructor of JFrame. I don't actually really set it. So if we go to the super title, you'll notice here, it's again calling the super of JFrame and setting the title. So let's go there too. And look here, inside frame, which is belongs to AWT, inside there, they're setting the title however they're doing it, right? And I don't really care how they do it. So what I would like to is just to call the constructor of my JFrame, which sets the title. If I wanted to, I could also probably set it a different way, such as set title function that I inherited and just put the title there. Right? Either way would have worked fine. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
It's just JFrame had multiple constructors, and one of the constructor takes a title. So I said, why not just use his rather than rewrite all of the codes and whatnot? It could have done many ways. The point is that it could have done in any ways that they give you access to. You could have even wrote your own little code to do the set title. Maybe if we go look at set title here, we could see how they do it, which is accessing a property, well, a attribute title, right? So in this case, do I have access to that title variable? We could say title. It seems so, and I could say, actually, sorry, this dot title. See, I don't have access to that variable title. So that variable title is something that's private to JFrame or whoever it is. So this title over here, this title over here, if we go to it, the default accessor would be package private, and I am not within this package, so I do not have access to this title. Does that make sense? So I could use the functions that they set to protected or public to be able to change the title, or to use the constructor of my JFrame to set the title. Any of those ways would have worked. And let's just run it to test. As always, test your stuff. So notice the title bar is still correct. Cool? You'll notice that when we do the set default close operation exit on close, even though we have multiple windows, one of them being closed closes all of them. So this is actually a scary thing to do, because maybe I don't want to close my whole application when other window closes. So let's go back to our main, and rather than JFrame exit on close, let's go see what other things are there. JFrame dot, and notice there's a bunch of these values. Exit on close, dispose on close, do nothing on close, hide on close, etc., etc. And which one is the default? I don't know. Let's not assume on that. Let's always specify. So what would happen if I do nothing on close? Let's see what happens. And this is on my other window, not on my title bar. So if I do title bar and close, well, it still closes my application. But if I close on my other window, hey, it does nothing, right? So it's cool to play around, test things out, figure things as it goes. Obviously, you could also click on it and maybe you have some information. Control click. So do the nothing, blah, blah, blah. The hide window, default window close operation. So this is the default. Notice we read it after 1 second of clicking around. And this is what you kind of want to get into doing. So that one was hide on close, let's say. So let's say maybe for my GUI, I want to hide on close unless specified otherwise. So maybe I could recreate this constructor multiple times. And this time we could say, this was a integer, I believe. It's a final int. So here we could do final int. We could say default close operation, and someone could give me that value, and I could add it here. Cool. I could have done something else too, which was to give it a default value. So I could have said equals JFrame dot hide on. Why is it not popping up? It's probably not allowing me to access it. I can't give default values. This could be a thing related to the Java version we're using. So we could ignore this for now, or whatever. We'll come back to it if need be. Cool? Any questions? So now when I create my GUI inside main, I could create multiple GUIs. Let's actually erase this. We're not doing anything with Windows, so we could erase those. And we could name them differently. Window 1, Window 3, and this one gets a JFrame dot hide on close. This one gets, I don't know, exit on close, etc., etc. So now if I run, you'll see I'll get multiple windows with doing one line of code rather than doing 5 lines of code. So we're creating our own customization, and this is really cool. So this is our other window here. This is our title bar, which is our first line 25. This is another title bar. I'm not sure if it's 29 or 30 or whatever. We'll keep them together. Windows 3 is this one. New GUI Windows 3. So if I click on the X here, it will hide on close. Sorry, it was the other Windows 3, which was exit on close. Let's call this Windows 4, title bar 1, title bar 2. Let's try it again. Again, copy paste, not the best friend. So again, other window is this guy. Title bar 2 is this guy. Right, we'll keep that here. Title bar 1 is this guy. Window 4 is this one, which exits the application. Windows 3 is this one, which hides on close. So if I click on this, the other windows should stay. Perfect. And Windows 1, it's whatever default it is. Nothing is going to happen. And then title bar is our first one that we created. Cool? So if I click on this one, on Windows 4, exit on close will exit all application. Any questions? You'll notice one thing that I usually get a question, I don't know why you guys didn't ask it, is, are we allowed to do this? Well, yes. In the end, even though we don't have a variable, a container, not a container, more of a reference to this object, the object is being created and used by other things. Right? So the object will still get created in the heap memory. It's just we don't have a reference to it. So I could never say that window 1 go change something because I don't have a reference to it. Right? I can't do the same thing I could do with window. I can't say window go in, let's say, do something, repaint, do something, whatever that is. Right? I have access to this one because I created a variable that has a pointer to it. But these 5 things are usable but not changeable, so I can't change those values anymore because I don't have a reference to those objects. Cool? So let's go back. So again, we could create as many constructors as we want to give more values, more power to us to make our code much cleaner inside main. So another thing we could have probably done is maybe create another overloaded constructor, which this time takes, let's say, a int width and an int height. So now here I could say height, and here I could say width. Right? And if we go back inside the GUI, in this one I could say window 1, I want it to be the size of 900 by 900. Again, this is because the signature, the function signature is different for all of them. And look at this one, window number 1, the size is 900 by 900. And again, I only needed 1 line of code rather than 4. Is that clear? This is why we want to do inheritance. One of the main first reasons is we could create customization to our needs and use. So if no questions, let's move on. So the first thing we could do is also set a location to where all of this goes. Actually, before that, you'll notice that a lot of this code is repetition. So notice here, notice here. So what we could do, rather than repeating ourselves, actually all of this, with just maybe one small change, is we could extract those and put it into one function. So like this, if ever I need to change some of this part, something becomes deprecated, I don't need to go change 4 locations with set size. I could directly just change that one location that's being used. So one thing we could do is right click on this, and we could extract the method, and we could call this initialize. Right? And we want it to be private. We don't want others to call this. Yeah, replace it. Let's see, replace it. And notice that automatically the computer detected that it's seen this initialize multiple times. And it went and did a lot of things for us. And this is the cool part about having a good IDE. So let's put that initialize a bit down actually. Now notice this initialize. Notice that each one of them, they do a bit differently. So in this case, it keeps the in this case it keeps the default height and width. In this case, where I get a height and width, it passes it to it. And in this case, where I get a default close operation, it only passes that part and keeps the default height and width. Now, if you notice, all 3 again did the same thing, but that same thing is centralized to one location. And notice I set it to private, so no one outside could call directly this function. Cool? Any questions about why I did this? About anything, really? So again, our constructor is to set some rules. So now if we go again back in main, you'll notice I could create multiple different variations of the GUI with just one line rather than 4 or 5 meaningless lines, right? And now we could add a bit more information in there too. If we wanted to, we could also set the location that it starts at. So set visible, I'm going to keep it at the end, but we could set the location where it starts at. And again, it takes an X and Y. Maybe let's set this one to, let's make them start at 500, 500. Okay, we're going to talk about location in a second. Let's just first run it. Stop and rerun. You'll notice that now my objects are not going to get created at the top left, except for other window, which was the non-customized window, right? You notice that everything is starting at this location over here. Look at where my mouse is, because this is important, right? Everything is starting there. Now what's going on is, let me close one of them that has the power to close everything. What's going on in graphics, I know this is not a graphics class, but this is something to note, is in graphics, the main location, the 0, 0, the location, the starting location of your graphics is at the top left of your screen, which is here. This location is the position X0, which is usually the width, the horizontal location of your window, and 0Y, Y being the vertical line. Okay, so at the top left here, it's 0, 0. And if you wanted to go down, well, you're going to set the Y. And if you wanted to go right, you're going to set the X. So in this case, notice that we set the, not that one. Let's go back to GUI. Notice that the location X, we set it to 500. So it went forward to the right 500. And then we set the Y to 500. So it went down to 500, which was around here. Let's set the X to 1000. And again, just make sure you're not out of your location. And these are, I believe, pixels. I'm not positive, but we'll just run it. Now you'll notice it's going to be more onto the right and still the same amount of height. Cool? Any questions? Now, if we didn't want to do this, we could do this as a customization. If we didn't want to do this, actually, let's make it, let's make a new GUI here, a new constructor again, and then this time it'll take a int width height, and it'll also take a position. notice that, actually, while we're at it, let me just change this for 1 second. If, no, that should have been the height. Actually, these variable names are bad. Let me change refactor, rename. So that one was the width. Right, that makes more sense. I2 doesn't really make sense. Refactor, rename to height. Height on close, it doesn't make sense either. Refactor, rename, default close operation. Then this makes more sense. And now if I read here, it says width 300, height 300. So anyway, back to here. So over here, let's just put that there for a second. And we're gonna set location to my X and Y. Now, notice that I had to add the width and height rather than just adding one without that. So let's say if I wanted to do this, actually I'm gonna do it right here. If I wanted to do this without the width and height, you'll notice it's gonna give me an error. Can someone tell me what's the error and why am I getting that error? Again, here I could put 300, here I could put 300. Why am I getting an error here without me showing you the error message for 1 second?
Yeah, same.
What is the same?
The two overloaded functions.
Okay, yes, you're right. These two are the same. This is called the function signature. Okay, again, the terminology is important because we want to go to the workplace and be able to converse. So here, the problem is, well, actually, they're not completely the same. If you notice, the variable name is different.
But it taking the same type of input, means it's taking the one string and two integer.
Exactly. So the function signature actually doesn't say that the name of the variables matter. Actually, for the computer doesn't give any, I don't want to use bad words. I'm used to that. I'm sorry. I'm going to try something new. It doesn't care about what you name your stuff, right? You could have named, like you saw here, he named it A1, A2, some weird ass name. The point is, the computer never cared about the names of your variables. That was done for us to make it more visible, more readable, have an easier time with what's going on, right? So that's the big problem. The problem is, it doesn't care about the names, and because of that, the function signature only includes the parameter types. So inside this function signature, it's actually this. So function, let me type it correctly, signature, or in this case, really we should have said method signature, is gonna be, right? This is gonna be GUI, string, int. That's the Java signature of this method. And if we look at this line over here, we notice it's actually the same thing. GUI, string, int. Even though we wrote width and height, and over here we wrote X and Y, well, the computer doesn't really care about that. It doesn't know how you're gonna use it. It just knows that the function signature here, they're both matching. And for that reason, I was forced to do this thing. Right? And again, we didn't need to put this inside a constructor either, but I'm just showing you some stuff that's gonna happen when you program, and you're gonna come to it eventually. Today or another day, it doesn't really matter. Cool? Any questions before I move on?
Yes, sir. Sir, why we don't use the default constructor concept in order to take a parameter?
I don't know why the default didn't happen. It might be because of our Java version. So inside, I don't know how to get there from, let's see here, edit configuration. So over here I'm using, 1 second, it was there, now it's not showing. Okay, right now I'm using the version 9, right? If the default thing hasn't been created, then I can't use it inside this feature, right? I don't know which version of Java has that. So if we go and Google this, 1 second. This is why we want to Google some stuff, right? We learn about default parameters, Java, default parameter value. There we go. And look at the question. Stack Overflow, does Java support default parameter values? So if we go down, it says no. Okay? It says if you're doing constructors, maybe you want to think about static factory methods, but we're not there. Okay? But in this case, the language Java does not use any default parameters, which we can't use at all. Cool? And you could read more into it, which I would suggest, because Java might be the main language for you guys. You want to delve into it and understand why they didn't do that. And again, I hope eventually your goal is to become the guys who decide the next path to Java. But for now, you want to understand them a bit better, so you want to go and read further. Okay?
Okay,
So
sir.
in this case, we just found out together, because I didn't know this, Java does not have default parameter values. Default means if I put y equals 500, then whenever I call this constructor, I could actually leave out the last parameter, which is y. For those that don't know. Cool? So, what are we gonna do? So, let's go ahead and erase that extra bit, which was this one. Or this one. Okay, where we don't care about the method. So, one thing we could also do, rather than setting the location here, where we set it from this, we could also set the default location to make it centered. So this is done by doing set location relative to. So you could say, hey, it's relative to this side of the screen, to that stuff, etc. But if you set it to null, it means center it in the screen. Okay? And we could also made of the size full screen and so on. You could have done whatever you want. Just showing you some codes that might be a bit interesting. Now everything should be in the center. Okay? Notice that the bigger stuff is going to take more space, but they're still centered. And the smaller stuff is still centered. Okay? And this other window, if you don't remember, this is not created by us. It's not a custom window. Cool? So one of these was to close everything. There we go. So let's move on. Another thing we could have done, rather than saying, let's go back here, rather than saying set size and then set location, we could have actually mentioned all of them together. So here, where we set location and thing, we could have said, rather than set location, we could have also said set bounds. Okay, and again, this bounds is overloaded. We could have gave it a rectangle, or we could have gave it 4 parameters, which is the x, the y, the width, and the height. So here we could have said x, y, width, height. Oops, sorry. And this would have done the same thing. Okay, rather than dividing them. Okay, and as always, if you want to understand something, you could do Control Q, and you could read the description and figure things out, right? So the overall description of what it's going to do, and for each of the parameters, what it means, right? Cool? So this is another way of doing the location plus the width and height. Okay. Any questions so far? Because now you could again look through all the functionalities you have and see if there's something else you want to modify, do. There's a lot of things I skipped. Okay, so just read the function, see if there's something fun in there. All right. So the next thing is, if you have no questions, empty GUI like this is a bit meaningless to us, right? We can't do much with a empty window that doesn't do anything, right? So actually, let's go ahead and comment. I'm gonna comment these things out. You could.
Hello.
Yes. Hi.
Sir, can we get a break?
Oh yes. Sorry, I'm bad at that. So it's 3:15. Come back by 4, and we'll continue where we left off. Good.
Thank you.
No problem. See you guys soon.